All right, so let's move on to talking a little bit about formulas and functions inside Excel. For those of you that come to a course with deep knowledge in Excel, this will all seem pretty rudimentary in kind of standard knowledge. But for those of you who have never used Excel before, going through the basics of how to write a formula and use functions will be really important. A lot of the homework that you will do in these courses will give you an example of what the formula is or how to calculate a certain equation, and you'll have to figure that out on your own. So let's talk a little bit about how to create those formulas inside Excel. And so there are a set of operators that you'll use. All right, so let's talk about multiplication. Is going to use the asterisk or star, and that's found above the 8 key. So you'll need to hold down Shift and the 8 key, and you'll get an asterisk or a star. To do division, you're going to use a /. That's the division operator. Addition is a plus. Pretty simple there. Subtraction is a minus symbol. And then to do exponents, you'll use what is called the caret symbol, but it is an upward facing arrow. And that's on the above the 6 key. So you'll do Shift 6 to create the caret or the exponent symbol. All right, so those are the basic operators that you're going to use when creating your own custom formulas. Let's go ahead and create a few of those now. And some of these, they might not make a lot of sense, or they might be very simplistic, and we can debate whether or not that's really relevant or it's too simple to talk about for advanced users, but we can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to column C, and I'm going to right click on it and insert a new column. And I'm going to create this column header as age in months. All right. And what I'm going to do here is we're going to create a very basic formula, and this isn't perfect, but it gives a good example. To create a formula, we need to start the formula with an equal sign. So there's my equal sign. When I do that, it tells Excel that I am creating a formula. All right. I'm going to hit the equal sign, and then I'm going to click on cell B2. All right. And you'll see the B2 is in blue colored font here, indicating that I'm referencing that cell in this formula. And I'm going to talk about reference cells and absolute cells in a moment. All right. And then we're going to hit the asterisk. Okay. So if you have a separate number pad on your keyboard, there'll be an asterisk key just by itself. If you don't, for many of you, if you're using a laptop, won't have a separate numeric pad like I do on my keyboard. So you'll hit Shift 8, and that will create the asterisk or star. All right. Then I'm going to enter the number 12, okay, to show that I want to multiply that age by the number of months. Now it's not perfect because that age, you may be 24 years and 11 months, so it's not perfect, but it just is used to reference how we're going to do that. So it did the calculation for us, so that's 288 months if you're 24 years old. Now we can use this trick that I showed you in the last video, which is to grab the lower right corner of the cell and drag it down. And when you do that, you'll notice that the subsequent cell, the one below it, cell C3, has the correct reference. If I click in the formula bar, now it changes to cell B3. And if I go to the next cell, it's B4. All right. So what Excel does is it automatically knows that you are referencing the cell that you previously referenced, and it's going to increment the cell or the reference based on where it's located. All right, now we're going to talk about absolute references in a moment, which doesn't abide by that particular rule. All right, so quickly, I didn't have to go through and do B3 and B4 and B5. I can just drag down, and in fact, copy and paste would work here too. Okay, so that's quickly adding in a calculation there for the number of months. Now, we can do something a little bit different with weight. So I'm going to click on cell G, or column G, right click and choose Insert Columns. And this time I'm going to type weight, and then in parentheses I'm going to say in kilograms. Okay. And we're going to do a slightly different reference here, all right? Over on, I guess I'll put it over on the side. I'm going to put a reference that says kilograms to pounds. And this isn't exactly the correct name for it, but that's what we'll put in there. And I'm going to enter the number 0.4636. Okay, so we'll put that number in there. One thing I like to do when I am using a number as a reference, because I'm going to use this in a formula in a minute, is to highlight this cell a different color. So I'm going to change the background of this cell to a light yellow color, sort of a gold color there, okay? What that means to me and to anybody else that uses my worksheet is that that particular number is going to be used in formulas in the worksheet. So if you change this number, it's going to change the formula. All right. So I'm going to go to cell G2 now, and I'm going to hit the equal sign, which means I'm creating a formula. And I'm going to click on cell F2 and then hit the asterisk and then click on cell J2. Okay, which is the cell I'm referencing as sort of a factor or formula for being able to convert the weight in pounds to the weight in kilograms. And then we'll just hit enter. And now that is in there. Now I'm going to show you something that happens here. If I go and click the bottom right of this cell and drag it down, everything shows up 0. Why does that happen? Because Excel automatically changed the reference to the kilograms conversion to the next cell below it. I don't want it to do that. Now what I'm going to do is go into the formula bar itself, click in that formula bar, everything should highlight with colors, and I'm going to change the cell reference so that it is not in a reference to a cell, but an absolute reference. And to do that, I need to add dollar signs to the front of the letter reference for the column and the number reference for the cell, okay? And when I do that, it still functions properly, but now when I go and copy it and drag down, you'll see that J2, as I navigate between each cell stays the same. It doesn't move. But the row reference for F3 and F4 changes appropriately, okay? And that's the difference between a reference to a cell and an absolute reference to a cell. Okay, so it's really important. You're going to need this as you work through some of the problems throughout your courses. All right, so that's absolute references and relative references to a cell. Okay, now let's go ahead and move on to a little bit more complicated. Well, I don't know if I want to call it really complicated, but being able to create differences between cells, which you'll need to be able to do. So I'm going to create a new sheet here. And I'm going to, instead of naming the sheet study participants, I'm going to call this blood pressure. All right, so I've got a blood pressure reference here. And I'm going to start with, we'll do record number since that sort of fits with what we've got going on. And then I'm going to call this baseline SBP. So that's a baseline systolic blood pressure. We'll double click and make that bigger, and then maybe we'll call this current systolic blood pressure. And what we want to do is calculate the difference between the baseline and the current blood pressure. So let's enter record number 1, and maybe what we'll say in here is that the baseline was 150 and their current reading was 136. And then for the second record in this set, we'll say it's 142 and the subsequent reading was 128. All right, and then we just want to do the difference here. And again, very simple. Equal sign, we'll take the baseline minus the current and get a calculation. Of course, we can drag that down and get the difference between the two. It happens to be 14 for both of them. Okay, this is just showing you how to use the multiplication and subtraction in there with the symbols or the operators, which works just fine. Okay, let's do one more. Let's call this one, we'll say pediatric lengths. I think that's pretty simple. We're not going to do record number here. We'll just do length, and then in parentheses, I'm going to say in cm, which is centimeters. All right. And let's enter some values in here for these. So we'll do 71, 79, 74, 75, 77, 82. All right. And then we want to calculate a z-score for these, and we're not going to get into exactly what the z-score is, but suffice it to say you'll be doing these later in your courses. Now, like I said, I'm going to create a mean and a standard deviation for these, and we're going to introduce you to how a formula works. So what I want to do is get the mean or the average of the data set that I have, and we're going to put an equal sign in. But instead of doing a manual calculation, we're going to use a formula. And the formula for mean in Excel is average. And so if I just type AVE, I'll get a list of formulas that have those letters in it, and average is one of them. So we'll take average, I'll click on it and hit tab. It automatically puts in an open parenthesis, and then we're going to select cells A2 through A7 and then put a closing parenthesis on it. So it creates the mean or average for me automatically. All right. Now I'm going to go over to my ribbon bar, and I am going to decrease the amount of decimal places here. I only want one decimal place after the number. And we're going to do the same thing for standard deviation. So we'll say equals, and if I type in ST, I get a standard deviation for P.P, which is population, and .S, which is a sample, and this is a sample. So we'll choose .S. And I should have hit tab and not enter. So let's select it and hit tab. Let's see if I can get it to select. It doesn't want to take it for me. Let's try it one more time. Standard deviation.s. There we go. I just double clicked on it. And we'll choose that range again and hit a closing parenthesis. And now we've got the standard deviation there. Of course, it put it in the wrong cell for me, so that's wonderful. Let's copy and paste it in and just make sure it's the same length. It is, or the same cells. Again, I'm going to select that cell as the active cell and decrease the size of it so it's just got one position after the decimal place. Okay. So I've got the mean and the standard deviation now. Like I said, I like to highlight these so folks know that when I've used that value in a formula, it sort of makes sense there. We're going to create a little bit more calculated formula or complex formula. So use the equal sign and then open parentheses. All right. And what I want to do is I want to say, let's take the value of the first entry, which is 71 centimeters, okay, and subtract the mean from it, okay? Close parenthesis, and let's just make sure this works so far. All right, now remember, I don't want B9 to move, so I have to put a $sign before the B and before the 9, and that works properly because I want it to stay with the mean, all right, and calculate it. So that looks good. The difference between 76.3 and 71 is negative 5.3. That looks good. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to divide that number by the standard deviation. So I select that here. And again, I don't want this to move when I copy my cell references, so we'll put a $sign before the column letter and the row number. All right, and then I can select the bottom left and copy it all down. So this gives me a z-score, which really just tells me how many standard deviations away from the mean is the actual value. In fact, we can mess with this to make a really big one. Like let's just say it's 102 centimeters, maybe even quite a bit larger. Since it's included in the average, it's kind of hard to get it to fall out of that range, and I need more samples in here. But you'll notice that as I enter the numbers, it changes along with the data set. So if I move this to like 69, for example, everything updates. It's one of the benefits of creating these formulas in Excel using references to the actual values is that it all updates automatically. I don't have to hand calculate any of the information that's there. All right, so in this particular worksheet, we were able to create some sample data, create a formula, use a function, and then reference the output of that function in a formula here in column B. Okay, I'm going to pause there on this particular example, on this particular video, and we'll go on to using the data analysis tool pack in the next video.